All right. We are now officially live from the 713. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Make sure I'm coming through clear from the audio standpoint. And we are golden like Pony Boy. Let's go ahead and jump right into today's topic, which is going to be on how I got my very first real estate deal. So, going to chronologically talk through the steps on how that was, overcoming limiting beliefs that I had, and also acquiring that with no money out of pocket. Because I'll tell you, is that I had most people have the excuse to say, well, I don't have enough funds to get started in real estate. I was actually worse off than many people as I owed the bank money. I was in the negative. So when there is a will, there is a way. And if not, you'll just find a excuse. That's what I've learned. And those of you, of course, on the YouTube, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you can be informed of these bombs and golden nuggets dropped moving forward. So I don't know if it's just me, but we're already at the end or towards the end of January, and time is just flying. I believe that happens when you get older, and I guess that's the case. And next week, they're at my gym. They're having boxing and brews, where it's going to be officially jumping in there, sparring with multiple people. And today, I'm actually getting in the ring with one of the coaches to practice some more on my defense because I know, and I was having this conversation recently. Is that yeah, it's good to learn because I'm going to get in there and I'm going to learn. You're going to learn today, as Kevin Hart would say. But is it's different from learning from your failures and let's say real estate. And yes, those are it's when you fail is in the moment. It's like, oh man, this sucks. But is that's a different kind of failure versus when you're in the ring and you're in a combat sport. When you're experiencing failures, is you're going to be getting beat up and punched in the face. And there's this quote that Mike Tyson says that is everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Yes, it's been a while since I've been in fights. Growing up in Section 8 housing and what people would say the ghetto and hood is that every other day, especially with my older brother, which I'm a twin for those of you who are not aware of that. And he calls me, I'm a fraternal twin brother. He's as dark as Wesley Snipes. He's not that dark, but he beat me out the womb by 2 minutes, you guys, and he calls me little brother. It just irks me every time that does happen. And gosh, so we fought all the time. And then also, I remember fighting at school quite a bit as well. But ever since then, since mother moved us out from the inner city to the suburbs, is didn't have to get into fights like that. So it's been a while. But yeah, it's a good. I would say boxing is a good. What's that word I'm looking for? Something as a skill set to have in your back pocket. And those of you who are on live, go ahead and let me know where you're from. As mentioned, I'm here in the 713, which is the area code for Houston, Texas. So let's go ahead and jump right in today. And I always forget to put this banner up as we're welcoming everyone to the show, of which I do these streams every Friday at 1 p.m. And sometimes I'll push it a little bit later around 3 o'clock. But every Friday, there's a live stream. Every Wednesday, I post a video. So I post 3 times per week as far as uploads. So Wednesday, Friday, as well as Saturday. So you'll want to have your notification bell on. That way you can get those and have been upping the production. So let's go ahead and start on how the deal was found. And what I want to do is I want to go into the backstory of this. So at this time I started in the industry 2009 construction. I was a laborer. And I was in college at the time, and my friend who I lived with, his dad owned a construction company, so I had some free times during the summer and said, "Well, why don't you come work with us?" And at that time, that's when I fell in love with real estate. But I started studying people such as Robert Kiyosaki, for instance, and the rich and wealthy did not get that way by being laborers. So they actually got there by being more of an investors and investing in real estate, for instance. So I took a note of that and said, well, I want to become more of a investor. And so that's when I started shifting to more of the investing side and finding properties to actually invest in. But here was the first issue that I had, or the first problem that I had to solve, was I didn't have the money to get started. Is I was a college kid. And I remember I went into credit card debt, just not being financially smart. I was a consumer. I remember I had a Capital One credit card, two Capital One credit cards, and I had American Eagle, which is a clothing brand, and I just what is it, maxed out those cards. It was only just a few grand, like 1 to 2 grand or so. And at a later point, I ended up paying those back. But at that time, is I was just not financially savvy. And then that led to just me not having money when I got started in real estate, and actually negative funds because I kept over withdrawing my bank account to pay for gas. I would later pay it back, but then I was just in this spinless, vicious cycle with that. But then I ended up figuring out a way, because this at the time was, I had this very pivotal moment in my life that I was in college. Also, I was working with my friend in his dad's construction company. And I was just drifting into average land, I would say. Is I didn't know why I was going to college at the time. I was just going to college because everyone at my school was going to college. So I was just following the masses. Why I decided to get a human biology degree, don't have no clue. So I was just following just the crowd. And I was at this college party doing what college kids doing, and I ended up drifting away from the crowd, and I'm out in the middle of the lake, and this beaming question comes down to me. It says, Sterling, is this what you want to do with the rest of your life? And I believe everyone has moments like this, but it's whether or not you actually listen to whatever that was. I don't know if it was a higher being, a higher Sterling, God, whichever you want to call it, but I listened to it. And then that's when I changed the trajectory of my life for the better. I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking if I was doing it. I really wasn't even a smoker like that, like Mary Jane, as people would call it. But is I never really did any of that. I did drink on weekends because I was a college kid. And then also I cut out the news. And then also I got a new friend group, and I just not isolated myself. I just completely, because there's a definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And I knew if I wanted a different result, I had to change what I was doing completely and going to 180. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. And shortly after that, I ended up reading The 4 Hour Work Week and picked a goal that scared the absolute crap out of me, which was the world's fastest fireman carry mile. And let me see if I can find this somewhere, Sterling, so I can show you what that looks like. World's fastest fireman carry mile. And I attempted this record as just a way to push myself and pick a goal that just ended up, as mentioned, push myself and stretch me out of my comfort zone. And ever since, just fast forwarding through that, as I failed the attempt, but that's when I really ended up breaking through the limiting belief that I had for the longest, the fear of failure. And at that gym I was training at, that's where I found my mentor and the person who actually funded the very first deal. And so this is what the let's see, I'll pull this up for you. So all right. Okay. So this is the picture here, and this is me attempting the world's fastest fireman carry mile. So this is what it looks like here, where I carried this person in a fireman's position for a mile, and the time I had to beat was 11 and a half minutes. So the guy was flying. It was actually this guy right here. No, it actually wasn't him. It was another guy that ended up breaking it. But that is the position the person is, and they have to be in equivalent weight or heavier than me. They couldn't be. I was about a buck 50 at this time, buck 55. So they couldn't be 110 pounds. The person actually had to be my same weight or heavier. And everything was official. Like when the starting, what is it? When we started, which is this is the starting line just right behind me, is there had to be official track coach. We both had to record us stepping on the scale. So everything was very official. So I don't want to digress too much off that topic, but that CrossFit gym is where I ended up finding my mentor. And this was over the course of, I would say, 5 to 6 months. We formed a relationship. We were working out together, and I never even anticipated that they would be my mentor. I just put it out there in the universe that, hey, I want to get into investing, and I want to work towards that first deal. And I just put it out there, and it just so happened that the universe started putting the right people in my proximity, for lack of a better words. And so one day I approached him. His name's Will. Hey, let's go out to Subway and I would like to see more about how I can help you in your business because I knew he was in real estate, he was in construction, he owned some property. And I sat down with him. I said, how can I be of value to you in your business? Here's the kicker, Will. You don't have to pay me anything because I saw he's a little bit hesitant. And then he said, okay, well, this is what you can do. And the very next day, I was in his management office, seeing a lot of the day to day behind the scenes. And that's how I was able to get my foot in the door. So that's how that worked. And he, after working together for a while, he said, hey, I actually am looking to diversify from multifamily to buying some single families. Normally, it's the other way around from single family to multifamily. But that was my opportunity and I seized that opportunity. And so that's how that ended up coming to fruition with those steps and that actual partnership. And now we'll go ahead and go into how the deal was found. And as mentioned, those of you who are coming in here, go ahead and comment below and give me just a simple hello. I personally respond to everyone. And yeah, just go ahead and put in the chat in the comments. Just give me a hello or let me know where you are from. That way, I don't feel as if I'm talking to myself the whole entire time. I know I'm talking to you guys. You on this side, I think the focus may go out a little bit. Nope, focus is still there. You on the other side. Yes, go ahead and comment below and let me know where you are from. As I know, hopefully I'm not talking to myself. Yes, you on the other side that's looking around saying, is he talking to me? Yes, I am pointing exactly at you. Here we go. Is it that? Is that right? There we go. More like that, pointing right at you. So, all right. And okay, yes, there we go. Herndon, uh, Herndon Davis from Fort Lauderdale. So he got that. He was probably looking around for a while. I was like, is Sterling pointing at me? Yes, Herndon, I was talking to you. And I know I'm probably butchering your name. That's the first time I've said that. Herndon is probably how you would say that. And then we've got Claudia from Colorado. What part of Colorado? Denver, Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. It is beautiful out there. Last time I was there, I went to Breckenridge to actually do some skiing, and it did not go so well. But it's all practice, so that was my very first time, and it was a little interesting. But you got to start somewhere, is all I have to say on that. So going back to the story on how the first deal was found. So there's multiple strategies that you can use as far as finding deals. As you can go on market, which especially in today's environment is very tough and it's competitive. So on market is you can go through agents, you can go through brokers, you can look on Trulia, you can look on Zillow to find properties that are already listed through agents, and then reach out to the agent to say, hey, I would like to place an offer on that property. I'm interested in it. Or you can already work with an agent, realtor, whether it's a broker, and then they're the ones actually sending you these deals and listings. Let me go ahead and do this. And so those are the paths that you could take, or the off market, which has been my go-to. And you can actually go direct to the owner who may not actually be in the market to sell their property. And then you can, I wouldn't even say convince, but see if they would be interested in selling their property. And that way is you can, the path that you would take is one, there's driving for dollars to look for properties that need work. Or you can go to data providers such as PropStream's one, List Source is another one. There's so many, but those are some top ones: List Source and PropStream. On the commercial side, you've got CoStar, you've got Reonomy. So you can pull these leads from that database, and then most of them have the contact information already there. And then that's when you can do a text, you can do a call, you can do an email, you can do direct mail. So those are a couple channels that you can use. At this time, when I first started, is the path that I was taking is I was doing bandit signs. So the We Buy House signs, this was in 2013, 2014, where it was somewhat working, but it definitely was not as effective the years prior to that. So was doing bandit signs, was doing direct mail, so handwritten letters. And then the last but not least was actually networking with people. And this is key, is going out there and telling everyone what you do. Yes, everyone. Your mom, your sister, your kids' friends, just telling everybody. And I worked at this popsicle shop This was way back when. I remember that was one of my favorite jobs, actually. It was part time, and I was actually remember when I was there, and this stays between us. Is when I was there, is when there weren't any customers. I was still working on the real estate business, but is that owner is I remember telling him I was buying single families, and he actually referred me to someone who was interested in selling their property. I ended up butchering that deal because it was my first deal I was attempting to acquire and wholesale, and I just that's a whole nother conversation in itself and a whole nother topic of how I ended up butchering that. But I'll just get into to it really quick. Is that I walked through the property and I had no clue what to exactly look for as far as what needed to be repaired. And I shot that out to all my buyers, and they said, well, what you currently have it under contract at is too much. And that was the feedback I got from just about everyone. And then I went back to the owner, well, the seller, and then looked to renegotiate. We went back and forth. And then finally, we settled on the price. And then I was going to actually get the contract signed. We met at Burger King. Yes, of all places, we met at Burger King. I was going over the contract and I butchered it. I was stuttering, and then they ended up getting cold feet, and then they just left. So that was my experience on that very first deal before this deal that I actually ended up acquiring. So, and that's why I mean, it's just key to just tell everyone what you do. So this particular deal ended up coming from a wholesaler at a actual meetup that I attend, and at this time, so they sent it over to me, looked at the numbers, and the numbers did make sense. But here is a mistake I ended up making, and give a couple. Well, before I go into that, is that the mistake I made is I was just simply using rules of thumb. Rules of thumb are good for like back of the napkin math, but as far as making an actual purchasing decision, as far as okay, whether or not to buy this property, is that is that is a huge mistake I see many people make because the rules of thumb, I was just using the 1% rule, meaning that if the purchase price plus the renovation, so you're all into a property for $100,000, then your rent would be 1% of that, which is 1,000. In Indianapolis, you could actually get the 2% rule. Not now in those type of in those C neighborhoods, prices have gone up. You couldn't even get them in D neighborhoods now, but is was using the was able to get the 2% rule. But that does not factor in a lot of things such as property taxes. You could be in a flood zone, so your insurance could be higher. So rules of thumb are good just for that, just using rules of thumb high level. But at that time, my sophistication in underwriting was I didn't understand what the actual return on money would be. So, meaning if I invest $100,000 in this property, am I going to get $10,000 as far as back that first year on the cash flow? So I've got 10% cash on cash. And then when I go and sell the property or refinance the property, or let's say sell in 3 years, is what is my annualized return? Or let's say I double my money and I've held it for, mm, let's say I've double my money and I've held it for 5 years, then you would just do 100% divided by the five to break down, okay, this is what I earn annualized. I was not doing any of that for that first deal on the underwriting. So please learn from that mistake. There's plenty of calculators out there that are free. One is the Bigger Pockets calculator. Let me see if I can pull this up for you guys so you'll be able to see that. Yeah. And I'm not affiliated with you going to use this free calculator, but it's just one, just looking back, that will help you so much. And go ahead. And so this is what that calculator looks like, where let me see if I can go to one of the formal reports that I had here. And I was helping a friend analyze one of his deals too. And he did not consider, so the issue, what he ran into is he was flipping a property and what he thought he would be able to get for it, because he thought the neighborhood was going to turn around, is it did not end up getting to that point of what he expected. And he said, well, it looks like I'm going to have to hold on. Do I hold on to this property, or do I look to just sell it and dump it? And I said, well, let's look at the numbers. And one of the first things I asked him, I said, what's your cash on cash going to be when you shift it over? And essentially just in summary is it did not make any sense. He was actually losing money on the deal, but he did not understand how to exactly underwrite a deal because he was not a investor from that angle. And that's why it's good to have the right people on your team, or a mentor or a coach or someone that can provide you those insights. And this was another call I had with an individual yesterday on he is working on two 16-unit deals. And he said, yeah, I'm analyzing the deal. I was looking at the cap rate and the NOI, and that's how I was offering. I said that, and I didn't want to point him out on it, but I did point him out. I said, well, I don't want to drop his name, but I said, that is some good indicators, but you are shooting in the dark because you don't know what you're actually earning on your money. Yes, you've got the NOI, but is if you invest $100,000 or you put $100,000 down, and let's say it's another $100,000 for the improvements, so you're all into a $200,000. Is that, yeah, you've got the NOI, but what return are you going to have on that $200,000? So I would say for anyone who was on here, is that you've got to run your numbers. Please, if there's anything that you can get away from this stream, is trust thy numbers and run thy numbers, because this is a big mistake I see most people make. And this was the actual mistake I made myself. So please, I would say is, yes, it's good to learn from your own experience and mistakes, but a wise man, wise woman, or wise, however you want to take that, is a wise person learns from the mistakes of others. And that's always what I'm looking to do myself, is I listen to what other people say. And of course, you have to take some, most oftentimes with a grain of salt. But if I hear multiple people say the same exact thing, then I'm thinking, all right, I see that pothole that's just up there, that pitfall that I can run into. If I hear all these other people that say they ran into that and this was that experience they got from that, hmm, let me go ahead and just go this way or take a whole different strategy with that. So learn from others' mistakes, you guys. But as I just showed you, is just using a calculator to where you can really understand. So just underwriting this deal as an example is that you see the breakdown where you've got your, this is the expense breakdown, but let's say you've got your rental income, you got your expenses, and then you got your debt on the property. So just breaking that down is, where is this at? Okay, I'd have to revisit where this calculator is. All right, so yeah, so in essence is you've got 2,500 is the income, the total income you got, and then you got your operating expenses of about 2,100, and so you got everything broken down here. So on this property is you're earning, so this would be a good deal in particular. Let's see how this looks. So, but yeah, I don't want to go too much into the nuts and bolts, but just ensuring that you have a calculator that you're using so you understand this is your income, these are your expenses, this is your debt, and then after all that's paid, this is your cash flow on the property, versus shooting in the dark using a rule of thumb. And in actuality, once you buy the property, you're like, man, I am actually losing money on this deal, which is someone I was speaking to on it. He said the very first deal he got into is that once he bought it, he realized that he had to take, or not take money, but is he had to fund the project because he did not consider the money towards the renovations. And he said, man, I'm losing money on this deal. And I'll end up getting it back likely at a later point, especially when I sell the property and push up the value of the asset. But these are some things a calculator and you doing it right on the front end will help you. Versus, I see another common mistake, everyone trying to do everything on their own. If you can get someone who is a coach or a mentor, or you don't even have to go those things, or just someone who's able to look over your shoulder to where you could just send general questions to, hey, I'm working on this deal, this is my underwriting, would like to get insights, versus just doing it all on your own and making mistakes and learning from your mistakes. Yes, that's good to a sense, but wouldn't you rather avoid those mistakes if you can up front, because you wouldn't want to run into one that could just absolutely wipe you out. So just going back, yes, that is how the deal was found. Wholesaler sent it over, analyzed the numbers, which was very just using simple rules of thumb. I sent it over to Will, who was the one that he said he was going to fund the purchase price and also the rehab. So this is the property here, and I'll go ahead and show it to you. So this is 1720 North Leland, my very first property. So it is a 3 bedroom, 1.5 bath. Yeah, and with a 1.5 detached garage that's there in the back. And then there's also a basement below as well. So, and the purchase price was $25,000, and the expected rehab from the wholesaler, what he sent over, was $15,000. One thing is trust, but always verify. Do not go off of what the wholesaler, the agent, broker, whoever sends you the information. Many of the times is there's a conflict of interest because they're getting paid by you actually moving forward with the deal. So trust, but verify the information, because on this property, it actually ended up being $25,000, $25,000 as the rehab, and so was all into this property, $50,000, rented it for 850. And then the ARV at this time was $100,000. So we had $50,000 in equity. So this was an absolute steal at this time. And being able to buy these properties. So this same exact property, let's go to it now. 1720 North Leland. It is appreciated in value since this point in time. Indianapolis, Indiana. Yes, it is a real address. I just typed it in earlier. Come on now. All right, let me see if I can backpedal a little bit, because I just searched this a little bit earlier. All right, 1720. 17, all right, 1720 in Leland. There we go, Avenue. I think I may have put it in the street the first time. So yeah, here it says the estimate is 127,000. Of course, give or take with Trulia, is it can be hit or miss. It could be a little bit higher than lower, but still, the property here, it tends to not to be that far off, is what I'm getting at. So was all into this property back at that point, $50,000, and now it's actually gone up to 120,000. So you can see the amount of equity. I no longer own this property now. Actually, yeah, I no longer own this. This is, yeah. And so those are just some brief details on that. And as you're buying properties and you're doing the due diligence, for instance, so one, just going back, purchase price $25,000. The rehab was $25,000. That came out of my mentor's pocket, Will, as far as the purchase. So what I did was how we. Well, I'll get into structuring the deal. Well, I'll get into structuring the deal now. So what I ended up getting instead of a simple wholesale fee is I asked them, "Hey, I would like to retain equity in this deal." He said, "Yeah, you'll go ahead. I'll get 90% for essentially providing the funds, as well as he was the one that was going to do the rehab on the property, and for you managing the contractors, doing the leasing." As well as doing some property management and also managing the transaction with the title company. So I got thrown into the fire, but he said, you're going to get 10% of the deal. So I negotiated equity and looked more long term. Whew, I need to drink some water. But that's how that was put together. He funded it. And then I remember this was when I started being on bigger podcasts, because I had to figure out is I don't know any of this stuff. I knew a little bit of it, but commit first and figure the rest out later. So that is how that was. And I'm going to go ahead and read some chats on here. Appreciate it as always. Yes, Rico. Was it fellow? It's always great to see you every week on these. What do you call that? A constant, or a not a constant, but a frequent guest on these streams. So Rico Paul from Colorado Springs, and then Claudia is near Denver. What do you call that? I am having difficulty saying words for some reason right now. I know. All right, there we go. And then we've got Rico Paul. If you are house hacking with a low down payment, don't forget to add mortgage insurance to the calculator. Yes, there you go. Thanks for dropping bombs on that, Rico. And it's just those little things that you miss. And let's say, for example, the property is currently being assessed at, let's say, $1 million, and the owners owned it for, let's say, 10 years, 10, 20 years. So it's a low assessment, and you buy the property at $4 million. then it's going to get reassessed very close to that $4 million purchase price. And the thing is, if you do not take that in consideration in your underwriting, when you buy that, that's going to affect your cash flow heavily. And it's the same thing with what Rico's saying is if you don't add these things to your initial underwriting and you buy the deal, it's not one of those things that you can say, oh, my bad. I forgot to on my underwriting consider the reassessment and the property taxes going up. Could you guys give me a break? I'm sorry, I made that mistake. No, this is on you. So it's the same thing. What Rico's saying is don't forget to add that mortgage insurance to the calculator, because if you don't add it, you buy the deal. Now that's going to affect your cash flow and your actual returns you thought you were going to get. All right. So when you negotiate equity, how is that documented on the deed or in a contract or on the title? So it was put together in a operating agreement between myself and Will. So yes, an operating agreement was what we put everything in. Some people, when they're first starting out, they may do a handshake, but my preference, and it did help that Will was actually a attorney, so he definitely made sure that we had something on paper to in a binding agreement. So great question on that, Herndon. All right. And so, yeah, let's move along to the next steps here. So I went into how it was found. I went to the deal structure. So just some other elements that once the deal was bought is we started the rehab process. And from there, that's when he got his construction team in there. And let me go ahead and take a step back is one thing when you're doing your due diligence as well is that Zillow is actually a great resource to assess what crime is associated with the property or in the proximity. So I like going here. So I showed you earlier, this is 1720 North Leland, and also a good way to get an understanding of the market. So let's zoom this out. So you can see this is and with Indianapolis, it is when you're closer to the city or just outside the city, it can get very street by street and block by block. And some people can't believe that, but that is the case. When you push out to more of the suburbs, it's not the case. But so as you see here, there's a high concentration here on the east side of crime, and this happens to be the side of town to 10 investors tend to shy away from that are wanting well one less crime, a high turnover on their units, and they just want to have a more conservative investment that is not as and they're not as risk adverse, because when you're buying in these type of neighborhoods that have quite a bit of crime is one, your property is more susceptible to vandalism, and then also you have to consider your residents. And not saying anything against human beings, but is that you have to understand the people that are in your property. Is that if there's quite a bit of crime that's around there, and you have a family there, is families and parents, for instance, want their kids in more better living environments. So it's likely that if you do invest in these neighborhoods, is that you're going to have a high amount of turnover because they really don't want to be. Those people don't want to be there, and oftentimes that's their last resort, and they want to actually get out. And then I've had this happen a couple times when buying properties in these types of locations here where there's more up and coming, but there's still quite a bit of crime on one of the properties. I remember it was, I forget the address. It was on South Ritter on the near east side. And it was, where was it particularly at? But it was in a well-established park called Irvington, but still around Irvington is just not the best. But Irvington proper itself is really is I wouldn't say affluent location, but it's I would say a B minus, a solid B minus location, the B. And so with that is that when we were flipping the property, is I remember we were completely done. We were doing showings and everything. At one point, someone broke into the property and actually stole the brand new furnace. And that's what you get in these types of locations. And yeah, that's on you. Now you got to replace the furnace. So and I remember on some of the properties is at a later point we would put in the what do you call that, the stove and the refrigerator, because we were concerned that they would get stolen. And that's when we actually just shifted we only bought several properties in these type of locations. Most would consider D, just because that various reason is it's just more management intensive. It's just not worth the risk, I would say, for my so personally. Everyone has their different investment goals and philosophies. So that's just one tip I wanted to give to you, just a tip. And so go ahead and remove that. And then also another source that you can use is spotcrime.com is a way to look at crime. So get in there, start doing the renovations of the property. We're actually using Will's his construction team with his property. So we're using his maintenance guys as to do the construction on the property, or as far as the rehab, because it wasn't a significant amount, but it was a good amount. And so we're getting through it, and it's actually taking longer than expected. And the next mistake that I ended up making is when we're about 75% ready, that's when I put it up for lease. Bad idea, because we lost quite a bit of really quality really quality tenants, or ideal tenants, because they couldn't see the vision of the end of what the home would have looked like. Because yeah, there was still a bit away, and I was the one showing that, and that was a mistake I ended up making. Yeah, I should have waited a lot further along, closer to about 95% completed. So fast forward, ended up getting two people in there. It was got one guy was a bar back, and then the other guy was the manager of the bar. And so they ended up signing the lease. It was 850, and it was like, woohoo, now we're getting cash flow from the property. So there was that. But then here is where issues ended up coming up, and everything ended up flowing to me, of which the neighbor just next door, oh man, I remember, and they had my number directly too. And so this neighbor right next to us is that the one of the tenants is, when they would drive in with their truck, is they would drive into the neighbor's yard just right here. And I kept getting calls from this lady all the time, and she would complain to them too. And yeah, so I kept getting calls from her, because I wanted to help the situation, and when I was green behind the ears too, so I was still learning a lot of this. But man, so many calls. And then finally, we went back and forth of just now putting this fence up, which I'm trying to think who actually paid for. I believe we ended up going half and half, because it actually added to the property, but it was right on both of our property lines. So it's not one of those things that she could simply put up, and it's not one of those things that we could simply put up. We actually had to agree to put that up. And then also what happened is those tenants moved out. Yes, they moved out mid lease, didn't even let us know, and got two other people from their bar to start renting there. And they ended up getting behind on rent, and we actually had to evict them. Yes, we had to evict someone that we didn't even sign to the lease, and that's just one of the laws that you have to go through in Indianapolis. So I had to figure that out, and that's just one of those things. Is that yes, through that's why I've been a huge proponent on just. Let me go ahead and go back here, change this, and that's why I'm a proponent on committing first and figuring the rest out later. Because there was no books or anything I saw out there that I actually read, or being in the forums, that okay, well, this is one issue that you may run into, because it's somewhat, you would say, anomaly situation, but it does happen. Um, hey, if someone moves out of your property mid lease and they get someone else in there subleasing, hey, here is what you do. Because in them writing that in their book, I did not see this happening. But then once it happened, that's when I started researching and said, oh, these are the next steps that we do want to take. And so the ultimate business plan with this particular deal was buying it and just holding on to it for long term. It being a buy and hold for cash flow purposes, which is exactly what we did. So bought it for 25,000, put 25 into it, all in 50,000. The rented it for 850, and then ended up the ARV at that time, which was able to get from comparable properties, was just over $100,000, and this is a pretty solid area. I would call it a solid C plus neighborhood is what I if I were to put a grade on it. And lessons learned: one is that there's no excuses. If I was able to buy this first deal that you see here with no money out of pocket, and being some people use the excuse that they're young. I was 23 years old when buying this. Negative funds in my bank account, didn't have the funds, but ended up still figuring out a way to put it together. Second is, as mentioned earlier, is committing first and figuring the rest out later, because you could never know 100% of everything. I still don't even know 100% of everything, and I've been in real estate. This is since 2009 now, and I know I've got so much more to go. And then thirdly is just partnering with people that will help you go faster. You don't have to do it all by yourself, and I tell people that many of the time. So this deal was purchased. Those are details on 1720 North Leland. And then right after that, bought this property right across the street here. Is that one? No, no, no. Actually, this is the property, because I remember that one because it looked very similar. So no, 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 no. This one's it. Gosh, all these look the same. So this was the next property after that. I was looking at buying those ones, but they weren't for sale. But this was the very next one where bought this one where there was already a tenant in place that was paying 725, so it was cash flowing as soon as we bought it day one, and we bought that for $40,000, which that was a good deal as well. And one of the lessons learned on that is I let the tenant know that I was the owner, so and they had my direct number, so I was getting blown up on issues. So that's one thing for those of you, is that if you can separate yourself from letting the tenant know that you're the owner, because they'll of course look to befriend you as much as they can, to, hey, I know I'm gonna be a little bit behind on rent. Hey, actually, I'm not even gonna pay rent this month, and they'll just come up with all sorts. So if you can have a buffer, this is just a personal experience here, and say, hey, I'm sorry, you're going to have to actually pay, or we're going to have to move forward with legal proceedings. That's just what or hey, I've got to talk to my partner about this, or I've got to talk with the management company, or I'm with the management company. That way, they're just not coming direct to you and say, and you have to deal with all that. So that's just my personal experience here on that. So you got here who holds the operating agreement. If this is a long-term deal, do you get a lien for 10%? No. So this is just 10% equity in the deal. And who holds the operating agreement? So it's an actual document. So both of us can have our own copies. But yeah, it's just a document that we both sign, and it just spells out, hey, this is an agreement between Sterling and Will, and these are their equity stakes within this property. It could be my entity that owns the property, and then it could be his entity that owns the property. At that time, I was just using my personal name. So yeah, that's more so with there's more that the operating agreement goes into as well, but it just details, hey, this is the ownership and how we broke it down. He had 90% and I had 10%. It spelled out what we were actually contributing as well. So that's all I have for everyone. Appreciate you so much. And then those of you who are viewing this at a later point, any questions that you happen to have, go ahead and drop those below. And don't forget, you guys, it takes less than a second. Hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell. If you don't want to hit the notification, not the notification bell, but hit the like, and then the next step would be the notification bell. If you don't want to do it for the algorithm, do it for me. All right. All right, everyone. Peace. All right. Have a great one. All right. All right.